The morning sun hadn't even peeked over the horizon when Miguel Reyes unlocked the science building doors. The campus was quiet at 5 a.m., just how he liked it. His tired eyes burned as he pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway. This was his life, student by day, janitor by night. Miguel dipped his mop into the bucket, wringing out the excess water. His hands were rough from cleaning chemicals, but he never complained. Each swipe of the mop brought him closer to his dream of becoming an engineer. "Hey Miguel," early as always, called out Mr. Patel, the security guard making his rounds. Miguel smiled. "Got to finish before my 8 a.m. class." What most students at Westridge University didn't know was that the quiet guy sitting in the back row of advanced physics had already been awake for hours, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash bins. The same hands that solved complex equations had just disinfected the lecture hall where they'd all sit later. His small apartment was just a 20-minute walk from campus, a blessing since he couldn't afford a car. The place wasn't much. A single room with a kitchenette and a bathroom so small he could barely turn around in the shower. But it was his, and the rent was cheap enough that he could send a little money home to his grandmother each month. Last night, Miguel had stayed up until 2 a.m. finishing a project. 3 hours later, his alarm had jolted him awake for his janitor shift. Now, as he mopped the hallway outside the dean's office, his stomach growled. He'd have to wait until lunch. The $5 in his pocket needed to last until payday. Miguel carefully cleaned around the trophy case, pausing to look at the awards inside. Sometimes he imagined his name on one of those plaques. His reflection stared back at him, dark circles under his eyes, his uniform slightly too big for his frame. By 7:30 a.m., Miguel had finished his shift. He hurried to the staff bathroom to change into student clothes, jeans, and a plain blue t-shirt that he bought secondhand. No one would guess he'd been working since dawn. That's how Miguel wanted it. In the campus coffee shop, students lined up for expensive drinks. Miguel walked past them to the water fountain. His textbooks weighed heavily in his backpack. He'd found them used online, saving hundreds of dollars. The physics book had coffee stains and highlighted passages from its previous owner, but the knowledge inside was the same. Professor Davis nodded at Miguel as they passed in the hallway. "Ready for the quiz today?" "Yes, sir," Miguel answered confidently, despite his exhaustion. He'd studied during his lunch break yesterday, eating a sandwich while memorizing formulas. In class, Miguel sat next to Priya, one of the few students who actually talked to him. She didn't know he was a janitor, no one did, but she respected his intelligence. "Did you understand the homework?" she whispered as they waited for class to begin. Miguel nodded and quietly explained the concept she was struggling with. Helping others came naturally to him, even when he had so little time to spare. As the professor began the lecture, Miguel fought to keep his eyes open. His notebook page remained blank for several minutes before he forced himself to focus and start taking notes. He couldn't afford to miss anything. His scholarship depended on maintaining a 3.8 GPA. During lunch, while other students headed to the cafeteria, Miguel found a quiet corner of the library. He unwrapped his simple sandwich, just bread and cheese, and opened his laptop, a refurbished model that sometimes froze during important assignments. Today, he needed to apply for another scholarship. The one covering his tuition wouldn't help with next semester's textbooks. No one seeing Miguel in that moment would guess that he'd already put in a full day's work before most students had even woken up. They wouldn't know that after his afternoon classes, he'd head to the science lab where he volunteered as a teaching assistant for extra credit, then study until midnight before catching a few hours of sleep and starting all over again. Miguel's eyes drifted to a group of laughing students outside the window. For just a moment, he allowed himself to wonder what it would be like to just be a student, to have time for friends, for fun, for rest. Then he turned back to his laptop and continued typing his application, his determination pushing aside his exhaustion. What Miguel didn't know was that his life was about to change completely. And it would all begin with an ordinary exam day that would prove to be anything but ordinary. The day of the midterm exam arrived with gray skies and a steady drizzle. Miguel had been up since 4 a.m., not for his janitor shift this time, but to review his notes one last time. This exam counted for 40% of his final grade in advanced engineering principles. He couldn't afford to mess up. Miguel arrived at the lecture hall 30 minutes early, his worn-out sneakers squeaking on the freshly waxed floors he had cleaned himself just yesterday. He chose his usual spot at the back corner of the room, away from the chatter of other students who arrived in groups, laughing and comparing last-minute study notes. "Did you see the new sports car Dr. Chan arrived in today?" A student named Tyler whispered to his friend. "Must be nice to be the daughter of a tech billionaire." Miguel glanced toward the front of the class where Jessica Chen sat alone, her long dark hair hiding her face as she reviewed her notes. Everyone knew her father was some big shot in the tech industry, but Jessica never bragged about it. She was actually one of the smartest students in class, from what Miguel had observed during group discussions. Professor Williams entered the room, silencing the murmurs with his stern presence. "Phones off and in your bags. Nothing on your desks except pencils and approved calculators," he announced, his voice echoing in the large room. Miguel's heart raced as the exam papers were passed back row by row. His part-time janitor job had eaten into his study time this week. He had stayed up until 3 a.m. for the past 3 nights preparing. The dark circles under his eyes felt like permanent features now. "You have exactly 2 hours," Professor Williams said, checking his watch. "Begin." The sound of rustling papers filled the room. Miguel took a deep breath and flipped over his exam. The first page of problems looked manageable. He started working methodically, the pencil flying across his paper as he solved equations and sketched diagrams. Halfway through the exam, Miguel paused to flex his cramping hand. He looked up briefly, giving his eyes a rest from the intense focus. That's when he noticed something strange. Jessica, who usually worked with calm confidence, seemed to be struggling. She kept touching her throat and shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Miguel tried to refocus on his own paper, but something didn't feel right. He glanced up again just in time to see Jessica fumble with her pencil, dropping it on the floor. Her face had turned an alarming shade of red, and her breathing seemed labored. No one else was paying attention, all heads bent over their exams in deep concentration. Professor Williams had stepped out momentarily, something he often did during exams to get coffee. Miguel watched as Jessica reached into her bag with shaking hands. She seemed to be searching for something but couldn't find it. Then suddenly, she gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles turning white. She tried to stand up, but instead slumped forward, her forehead hitting the desk with a thud that finally drew attention from nearby students. Without thinking, Miguel jumped up from his seat, his exam forgotten. "She needs help," he called out, already moving toward Jessica as confused faces turned his way. By the time he reached her, Jessica was gasping for air, her lips starting to turn blue. One student had pulled out his phone to call emergency services, while others stood frozen, unsure what to do. "Does anyone know if she has allergies?" Miguel asked urgently, kneeling beside her chair. A girl spoke up. "She's allergic to peanuts. She mentioned it during the group project last month." Miguel gently but quickly searched Jessica's bag, finding an EpiPen in a side pocket. During his janitor orientation, they had required first aid training, including how to recognize and respond to severe allergic reactions. He had never thought he would actually need to use that knowledge. "I know how to use this," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Someone needs to tell Professor Williams what's happening." The room had erupted into chaos. Someone ran to find the professor, while others stood in a circle, watching in horror. Miguel removed the blue safety cap from the EpiPen and positioned it against Jessica's outer thigh. "This will help you breathe," he told her, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. "It's going to hurt for a second." He pushed the auto-injector firmly until it clicked and held it for 10 seconds as he'd been taught. Jessica's eyes fluttered, and she made a small gasping sound. Miguel loosened her collar and moved her into a recovery position on the floor. "Stay with me, Jessica. Help is coming." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the tension in the room, just as Professor Williams rushed back in, his face pale with shock at the scene before him. "The paramedics are here," someone called from the doorway. As the emergency responders took over, Miguel stepped back, suddenly aware that his hands were shaking. His unfinished exam lay abandoned on his desk across the room, the clock showing only 20 minutes remaining in the testing period. Professor Williams approached him. "What happened?" "Allergic reaction, I think," Miguel replied, his voice hollow with leftover adrenaline. "She couldn't breathe." As the paramedics prepared to take Jessica to the hospital, she reached out weakly and grabbed Miguel's hand. Their eyes met briefly before she was wheeled away. Miguel stood in the middle of the chaotic classroom, uncertain what to do next. His future might have just changed forever, but not in the way he could have possibly imagined. The ambulance lights flashed through the rain-streaked windows as the paramedics wheeled Jessica out of the classroom. Miguel stood frozen, his heart still pounding in his chest. "Son, are you coming?" one of the paramedics asked, pausing at the doorway. "She's stabilized, but we'd like to know exactly what happened." Miguel looked back at his unfinished exam paper. He had only completed about half of it, and there were just 15 minutes left on the clock. His scholarship depended on his grades, but then he remembered Jessica's frightened eyes and the weak grip of her hand. "Yes, I'm coming," he said, grabbing his backpack. As he headed toward the door, Professor Williams stepped in front of him. "Raise, your exam." The professor began, his face a mixture of concern and confusion. "I know, sir," Miguel said quietly. "I'll accept whatever consequences come with leaving it unfinished." The professor nodded slowly. "We'll discuss this later. Go." The ride to the hospital was a blur. Miguel sat in the front of the ambulance while the paramedics monitored Jessica in the back. They peppered him with questions about what had happened, what signs he had noticed, and how he knew to use the EpiPen. "Janitor training," Miguel explained, his voice barely audible over the siren. "They made us learn basic first aid. I recognized anaphylaxis from the pictures they showed us." At the hospital, nurses rushed Jessica through double doors marked emergency personnel only. Miguel was directed to a waiting area where he sat alone, his wet sneakers leaving puddles on the linoleum floor. The adrenaline that had carried him through the crisis began to fade, and exhaustion crashed over him in waves. He pulled out his phone to check the time. He would miss his afternoon class, and worse, his janitor shift started in 3 hours. Mr. Gonzalez, his supervisor, had already warned him about missing shifts. 3 absences would mean termination, and this would be his second this month. Miguel closed his eyes for what felt like seconds but was jolted awake by someone gently shaking his shoulder. A doctor in a white coat stood over him. "Are you the student who administered the EpiPen?" she asked. Miguel straightened up immediately. "Yes. Is Jessica okay?" The doctor smiled. "She will be, thanks to you. Another few minutes without intervention, and we might be having a very different conversation. You saved her life." The words didn't fully register. Miguel had just done what anyone would do, at least what anyone should do. "Can I see her?" he asked. "Briefly. She's resting, but she asked for you specifically." Miguel followed the doctor through winding corridors until they reached a quiet room. Jessica lay in a hospital bed, an IV attached to her arm and color returning to her cheeks. When she saw Miguel, her eyes widened. "You're the one who helped me," she said, her voice hoarse. "I remembered your face." Miguel shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would have done." "But they didn't," Jessica said softly. Everyone else froze. "You didn't." A nurse came in to check Jessica's vitals, and Miguel took a step back. "I should probably go. I have work." "Wait," Jessica called out. "I don't even know your name." Miguel Reyes." "Thank you, Miguel Reyes. My father will want to thank you properly when he gets here. He's flying in from a business trip in Tokyo." Miguel shook his head. "No thanks needed, just focus on getting better." As he turned to leave, Jessica added, "You're in my advanced engineering class, right? I've seen you. You always have the answers when Professor Williams calls on you." Miguel nodded, surprised she had noticed him at all. "Yeah, that's me." "What happened to the exam?" she asked suddenly, looking concerned. The question hit him like a punch to the gut. "Don't worry about that now." "But..." "Really, it's fine," Miguel insisted, though his stomach knotted at the thought of explaining a failed exam to his scholarship committee. "Your health is more important than any test." On his way out, Miguel passed a nurse's station where a news crew was setting up equipment. He ducked his head and walked faster, not wanting to be interviewed or photographed. The last thing he needed was to be recognized on the evening news by Mr. Gonzalez when he didn't show up for his shift. Outside the hospital, the rain had stopped, but dark clouds still hung low in the sky. Miguel checked his watch. He had exactly 45 minutes to get across town to his apartment, change into his janitor uniform, and make it to work on time. As he waited at the bus stop, his phone buzzed with a message from Professor Williams. "See me in my office tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp." Miguel stared at the message for a long moment. He had sacrificed his exam to save Jessica, and now he might lose everything he'd worked so hard for. But as the bus pulled up and he climbed aboard, he knew he would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. What he didn't know was that the wheels of fate had already been set in motion, and his life was about to change in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. Miguel didn't make it to his shift on time. The bus had gotten stuck in traffic, and by the time he arrived at the university maintenance building, he was 20 minutes late. Mr. Gonzalez stood by the time clock, arms crossed over his chest. "Reyes, this is the second time this month," he said, his voice stern but not unkind. "You know the rules." "I'm sorry, sir," Miguel said, still out of breath from running from the bus stop. "There was an emergency. A student had a severe allergic reaction during the exam, and I—" "Save it," Mr. Gonzalez interrupted, raising his hand. "I've heard every excuse there is. Rules are rules. One more absence or late arrival, and I'll have to let you go." "Understood." Miguel nodded, his throat tight. "Understood." That night, Miguel cleaned the science wing in a daze. His body moved automatically, sweeping, mopping, emptying trash bins, while his mind raced. If he failed Professor Williams' class because of the unfinished exam, he would lose his scholarship. If he lost his scholarship, he couldn't afford tuition. If he lost this job too, he wouldn't even be able to pay rent. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his grandmother. "How did your big test go today, Mio?" Miguel stared at the message, unsure how to respond. His grandmother had raised him after his parents died, working multiple jobs to keep a roof over their heads. She had cried tears of joy when he received his scholarship. How could he tell her that he might have thrown it all away? He typed a quick reply. "It went fine, abuela. Talk soon. Love you." The lie settled like a weight in his stomach. At 2 a.m., Miguel finally dragged himself back to his apartment. He had an 8 a.m. meeting with Professor Williams, then classes until 3 p.m., followed by another janitor shift. He would have to survive on less than 4 hours of sleep. As he collapsed onto his thin mattress, his phone buzzed again. An email notification. Miguel almost ignored it until he saw the subject line, "Missed exam. Urgent." The email was from Professor Williams. "Mr. Reyes, I've been informed of the full circumstances surrounding today's incident. Please still meet me at 8 a.m. tomorrow to discuss your academic standing. Professor Williams." Miguel stared at the ceiling, his exhaustion temporarily forgotten. The professor's tone seemed neutral, but what did academic standing mean? Was he going to fail the course? Sleep eventually came, but it was fitful and filled with dreams of ambulance sirens and falling grades. When his alarm blared at 6:30 a.m., Miguel felt as if he hadn't slept at all. He arrived at Professor Williams' office 10 minutes early, his hair still damp from a quick shower, wearing the cleanest shirt he owned. The hallway was quiet. Most students wouldn't be on campus for another hour. "Come in," Professor Williams called when Miguel knocked. The office was small but neat, lined with engineering textbooks and framed degrees. The professor sat behind a desk piled with papers, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "Sit down, Mr. Reyes," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Miguel sat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap to hide their trembling. "I received a call from the hospital yesterday evening," Professor Williams began, removing his glasses. "Dr. Walker, the attending physician, informed me that your quick action likely saved Ms. Chen's life." Miguel looked down at his worn sneakers. Anyone would have done the same. "But they didn't, did they?" The professor leaned forward. Everyone else froze. "You acted. That says something about your character." "Thank you, sir," Miguel mumbled, still bracing for the bad news. "Now, about your exam," Professor Williams continued, picking up a folder. "You completed 48% of it before the incident. Based on the portions you finished, you were on track for a near-perfect score." Miguel's head snapped up. "You graded what I had done." "Of course, but that's still a failing grade for half an exam." The professor's face was unreadable. University policy is clear: missed exams result in 0 credit unless there are extenuating circumstances. Miguel's heart sank. Here it came. However, Professor Williams continued, saving another student's life certainly qualifies as extenuating. He closed the folder. I'm prepared to offer you a make-up exam next week. Relief washed over Miguel like a wave. Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say. Don't thank me yet, the professor warned. The make-up will be more difficult. I have to ensure you know the material, not just that you got lucky with what you studied. Miguel nodded eagerly. I understand. I'll be ready. As he stood to leave, Professor Williams added, One more thing, Mr. Reyes. A maintenance worker mentioned seeing you in uniform during evening shifts. Are you working as a janitor here? Miguel froze, his hand on the doorknob. He had been so careful to keep his two worlds separate. Yes, sir, he admitted. I clean the science buildings at night. The professor studied him for a long moment. And you're still maintaining a 3.9 GPA in my advanced engineering course. 3.92, sir, Miguel corrected automatically, then flushed with embarrassment. A hint of a smile crossed Professor Williams' face. Remarkable. That will be all, Mr. Reyes. Miguel left the office feeling lighter than he had in days. He had a chance to save his grade, to keep his scholarship. For now, that was enough. What he didn't know was that Professor Williams was already reaching for his phone, about to make a call that would set even bigger changes in motion. A week passed in a blur of studying, classes, and late-night cleaning shifts. Miguel barely slept, surviving on cheap coffee and determination. He had retaken Professor Williams' exam and felt confident about his answers, but his body was reaching its breaking point. Dark circles had become permanent fixtures under his eyes, and his supervisor, Mr. Gonzalez, had started giving him concerned looks. You look like you're about to fall over, kid, Mr. Gonzalez said one night, finding Miguel leaning against his mop in the empty hallway. Maybe you should take the night off. Miguel shook his head. Can't afford to, sir, but thanks. The weekend finally arrived. Miguel had no classes, just his usual cleaning shift. He set his alarm for 4:30 a.m., giving himself enough time to review his engineering notes before heading to campus. The janitor schedule had him working early morning today instead of his usual night shift. The campus was eerily quiet at dawn. Dew sparkled on the grass as Miguel unlocked the main entrance to the science building. He enjoyed these peaceful moments before the day began, when he could pretend the building belonged just to him. He was sweeping the front steps when he heard engines approaching. Looking up, Miguel squinted against the golden light of sunrise. 3 vehicles were turning into the normally empty faculty parking lot, not just any vehicles, but the kind he had only seen in magazines and movies. The first was a sleek black Bentley with tinted windows that reflected the morning sun. Behind it, a silver Rolls-Royce glided silently across the asphalt. The third car, a dark blue Maybach, completed the procession. Miguel stood frozen, broom in hand, as the luxury cars parked side by side near the entrance. The doors of all 3 cars opened almost simultaneously. From the Bentley emerged a tall Asian man in an impeccably tailored suit. His salt and pepper hair was styled perfectly, and his posture radiated authority. Miguel instantly recognized him from tech magazines, Dr. Robert Chen, founder of Chen Innovations and one of the wealthiest people in the country. From the Rolls-Royce stepped Professor Williams, looking unusually formal in a blazer rather than his typical rumpled sweater, and from the Maybach emerged Dean Patterson, the university's highest administrator, whom Miguel had only seen from a distance at the annual scholarship reception. Behind them, moving more slowly and supported by a woman Miguel assumed was her mother, came Jessica Chen. She looked much better than the last time he had seen her. Her color had returned, and she was smiling, though she still moved carefully. Miguel's first instinct was to disappear. He was in his janitor uniform, clearly not meant to be part of whatever important meeting was about to take place. He backed away toward the maintenance door, but it was too late. Jessica had spotted him. "Miguel!" she called out, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "Wait!" 4 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. Miguel stood rooted to the spot, his worn uniform suddenly feeling even more threadbare in the presence of such wealth and power. Dr. Chen whispered something to his daughter, who nodded. Then, to Miguel's shock, the tech billionaire began walking directly toward him with purposeful strides. Behind him, Jessica, her mother, Professor Williams, and the dean followed. "Mr. Reyes?" Dr. Chen asked, stopping a few feet away from Miguel. "Yes, sir," Miguel answered, his voice barely audible. He clutched his broom like a lifeline. "My daughter has told me everything," Dr. Chen said, his voice deep and measured. "I understand you're the young man who saved her life." Miguel's face grew warm. "I just did what needed to be done, sir." "What needed to be done?" Dr. Chen repeated thoughtfully. "Most people don't recognize what needs to be done until it's too late. Fewer still have the courage to act when they do recognize it." Jessica stepped forward. "I brought him to meet you, Miguel. I told him how you left your exam to help me, how you knew exactly what to do when no one else did." Miguel glanced at Professor Williams, who was watching with an unreadable expression. "My daughter is my world, Mr. Reyes," Dr. Chen continued. "Her mother and I were in Tokyo when we got the call that she had been hospitalized. Do you know what that feels like? To be halfway around the world when your child needs you?" Miguel thought of his own parents, gone before he was old enough to really know them. "No, sir, I don't." "The doctor told us that without your intervention, Jessica might not have survived. The EpiPen you found and administered bought crucial minutes until medical help arrived." Dr. Chen's voice wavered slightly. "There is no way to repay what you have done for our family." A small crowd of early morning students had begun to gather, watching the scene unfold with curious eyes. Someone whispered, "Isn't that the janitor guy from our class?" Miguel became acutely aware of his dirty uniform, his calloused hands, the broom he was still holding. His two worlds were colliding in the most public way possible. Dean Patterson cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside my office." Dr. Chen shook his head. "No need to hide. I want everyone to see this." He turned back to Miguel, his expression intense. "Mr. Reyes, Professor Williams has told me about your circumstances, your night job, your perfect grades, your scholarship situation. I'd like to speak with you about your future if you'll give me that opportunity." Miguel looked from Dr. Chen to Jessica to Professor Williams, then down at his janitor's uniform. Whatever was happening, he realized his life was about to change dramatically. The dean's office felt too fancy for Miguel's worn janitor uniform. He sat uncomfortably on the edge of a leather chair, aware of the dirt under his fingernails and the cleaning chemicals that clung to his clothes. Across from him, Dr. Chen sat relaxed but straight-backed, his expensive watch catching the morning light streaming through the windows. Professor Williams leaned against a bookshelf while Dean Patterson sat behind his massive desk. Jessica and her mother had taken seats near the window, watching the interaction with interest. "Mr. Reyes," Dr. Chen began, folding his hands on his knee. "I understand you're studying engineering?" Miguel nodded. "Yes, sir. Mechanical engineering with a focus on sustainable design. And maintaining nearly perfect grades while working full-time as a janitor," Dr. Chen added. "Professor Williams showed me your academic record. It's remarkable." Miguel shifted in his seat. "Thank you, sir. May I ask why you chose engineering?" Dr. Chen's eyes were sharp, assessing. "My parents were immigrant factory workers," Miguel said quietly. "They died in an industrial accident when I was 7. The machinery was outdated, with poor safety features." He paused, gathering himself. "I want to design systems that protect people, that make workplaces safer for everyone, not just those who can afford the best equipment." The room fell silent. Jessica's mother wiped away a tear, and even the dean looked moved. "I'm very sorry about your parents," Dr. Chen said sincerely. "That's a powerful motivation." Miguel just nodded, not trusting himself to speak further about this topic. "Professor Williams tells me you've been offered a make-up exam for the test you abandoned to help my daughter," Dr. Chen continued. "How did that go?" "I think I did well, sir," Miguel replied, "but I don't know my grade yet." Professor Williams cleared his throat. He aced it, 98 out of 100 points, better than anyone else in the class. Pride flickered briefly across Miguel's face before he controlled his expression. "Mr. Reyes, Miguel," Dr. Chen leaned forward. "I didn't come here just to thank you, though my gratitude is beyond measure. I came with a proposition." Miguel looked up, curious despite his exhaustion. "My company, Chen Innovations, is working on next-generation safety systems for manufacturing environments. Systems that could prevent accidents like the one that took your parents. Dr. Chen's voice was steady, but his eyes were kind. We need engineers who understand not just the technical aspects, but the human cost of poor design. People with both brilliance and compassion. Miguel's heart began to race. Was this heading where he thought it might be? I'd like to offer you a full scholarship for the remainder of your education, Dr. Chen continued. Not just tuition, but housing, meals, books, and a monthly stipend that would eliminate your need to work as a janitor. Miguel's mouth went dry. This had to be a dream. He would wake up any minute back in his tiny apartment with his alarm blaring. Additionally, Dr. Chen went on, I'd like to offer you a paid internship at Chen Innovations during breaks and summers with a guaranteed job interview upon graduation. You would work directly with our safety systems team. The room spun slightly. Miguel gripped the arms of his chair. Sir, I don't know what to say, he stammered. Say yes, Jessica spoke up from her seat by the window. Please, Miguel, you saved my life. Let us help change yours. Dean Patterson leaned forward. This is quite extraordinary, Mr. Reyes. In my 30 years in education, I've never seen an offer like this. Miguel's mind raced. No more midnight cleaning shifts. No more choosing between textbooks and food. No more falling asleep in class from exhaustion. He could focus entirely on his studies, on becoming the engineer he had dreamed of being. What about Mr. Gonzalez and the cleaning staff? He asked suddenly. They're already short-handed. If I quit without notice. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose in surprise, then he smiled. You're concerned about your co-workers even now. That speaks to your character, Miguel. I'll make a donation to the university specifically to hire additional maintenance staff. Miguel took a deep breath. Then yes, I accept. Thank you, sir. Dr. Chen stood and extended his hand. No, Miguel. Thank you. For saving my daughter and for reminding all of us that character still matters in this world. As they shook hands, Miguel noticed a small crowd of students had gathered outside the dean's office, pressing their faces against the glass door. Word had spread quickly about the strange meeting between the janitor, the billionaire, and the dean. There's one more thing, Dr. Chen said, glancing at the curious onlookers. This offer comes with immediate effect. If you're willing, I'd like you to come see our facilities this afternoon. The company helicopter is waiting at the campus athletic field. Helicopter, Miguel repeated weakly. Jessica laughed. Welcome to my dad's world, Miguel. It takes some getting used to. Dean Patterson stood up. I think this calls for a proper announcement. The university should recognize both Mr. Ray's heroism and Dr. Chen's generosity. Agreed, Dr. Chen said. Miguel, would you be comfortable with that? It might inspire other students. Miguel thought of all the invisible workers on campus, the janitors, cafeteria staff, and maintenance crews who kept everything running while remaining unseen. Maybe this was a chance to make them visible too. Yes, he decided. But first, I'd like to change out of my janitor uniform, if that's okay. Dr. Chen laughed. Take your time. The helicopter isn't going anywhere without you. 6 months later, Miguel stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie. The face that looked back at him was the same, but somehow different. The dark circles under his eyes had faded. His cheeks were fuller, his eyes brighter. The tie he was straightening wasn't borrowed or second-hand. It was new, bought with his own money from his internship at Chen Innovations. His new apartment, a comfortable one-bedroom place close to campus, was quiet except for the occasional ping from his laptop. Probably another email from work. Miguel smiled, still not fully used to having a job where people sent him emails instead of giving him a mop and bucket. This morning was special. Today marked exactly 6 months since his life had changed completely. 6 months since those 3 luxury cars had pulled up outside the science building. 6 months since Dr. Chen had made him an offer that had transformed everything. Miguel grabbed his backpack, no longer stuffed with both textbooks and janitor supplies, just his school materials and the sleek company laptop Dr. Chen had insisted he needed. As he headed out the door, his phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Don't be late. Dad's helicopter just landed. The relationship between Miguel and Jessica had evolved in unexpected ways. Not romance, as some of their classmates had gossiped, but a friendship built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Jessica had insisted on being his campus guide to his new life, helping him navigate the strange world of privilege he now had partial access to. Miguel hurried across campus, noticing how differently people looked at him now. Students who had never given him a second glance when he was mopping floors now waved and called out greetings. Professors who had barely noticed him before now stopped to chat about his internship. The transformation sometimes made him uncomfortable. He hadn't changed, the world around him had. The university quad was packed with people gathered around a small stage that had been set up near the science building. Today was the official announcement of the Miguel Reyes Scholarship Program for Working Students, a fund established by Chen Innovations to provide financial support to students who, like Miguel, were working full-time while pursuing their education. Miguel spotted Professor Williams standing near the stage, talking with Dean Patterson. Nearby, Dr. Chen was speaking with a group of university trustees, while Mrs. Chen and Jessica chatted with Miguel's grandmother, who had been flown in for the occasion. Seeing his grandmother dressed in her Sunday best, looking healthier than she had in years thanks to the medical care Dr. Chen had insisted on providing for her, brought tears to Miguel's eyes. She had raised him after his parents died, working herself to exhaustion to keep him fed and clothed. Now she lived in a comfortable apartment near Miguel's, her medical bills taken care of, her retirement finally secure. "There he is," Jessica called out, spotting Miguel approaching. She waved him over excitedly. His grandmother turned and broke into a wide smile. "Mijo," she exclaimed, embracing him tightly. "Look at you, so handsome in your tie." Miguel hugged her back, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "How are you feeling, Abuela?" "Better than I have in 20 years, she replied, patting his cheek. "And so proud of you. Your parents would be bursting with joy if they could see you now." Dr. Chen approached, extending his hand. "Miguel, good to see you. Ready for the big announcement?" "Yes, sir," Miguel nodded, still a bit overwhelmed by all the attention. "I just hope my story helps other students like me." "It already has," Dr. Chen said, gesturing toward a group of people standing to one side. "Those are the first 10 recipients of your scholarship program." Miguel looked over and saw a diverse group of students, some in food service uniforms, others dressed as custodians or campus maintenance workers. Their faces showed the same mix of pride and disbelief that Miguel had felt 6 months ago. "I've invited them all to intern at Chen Innovations too," Dr. Chen continued. "Your idea of creating a special track for working students was brilliant. Fresh perspectives, strong work ethics, exactly what our company needs." Miguel smiled, remembering how nervous he'd been making that suggestion during his 3rd week at the company. Instead of dismissing it, Dr. Chen had called an emergency board meeting to implement it immediately. Dean Patterson approached with a folder. "Miguel, I wanted to show you this before the ceremony." He handed over a sheet of paper, Miguel's latest transcript. "Straight A's across every subject. The faculty is calling you our star student now. It's amazing what proper sleep and not working until 2 a.m. can do for your grades," Miguel joked, though his eyes shone with pride. "It wasn't the sleep," Professor Williams said, joining them. "It was always in you. You just needed the opportunity to show it." A university staff member approached, gesturing toward the stage. "We're ready to begin whenever you are, Dr. Chen." As they made their way to the stage, Miguel felt a tug on his sleeve. He turned to find Mr. Gonzalez, his former supervisor, smiling broadly at him. "Didn't get a chance to say it before, but I'm proud of you, kid," Mr. Gonzalez said warmly. "Always knew you were meant for bigger things than pushing 'em up." "Your training saved Jessica's life," Miguel reminded him. "If you hadn't insisted we all learn first aid, I wouldn't have known what to do." Mr. Gonzalez nodded, clearly touched that Miguel remembered this detail. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference. On stage, Dr. Chen stepped up to the microphone. The crowd fell silent as he began to speak about courage, compassion, and recognizing talent in unexpected places. As Miguel waited for his cue to join the stage, he looked out at the sea of faces, professors who had taught him, students who had ignored him, maintenance staff who had worked alongside him. His journey from invisible janitor to scholarship namesake had happened because he had simply done the right thing in a critical moment. No calculations, no expectations of reward, just the instinct to help someone in danger. As Dr. Chen called his name and the crowd erupted in applause, Miguel stepped forward into the spotlight. His past as a struggling janitor and his present as a promising engineer merged in this moment, reminding him that true character isn't built by circumstances but revealed by them. And as he approached the microphone to tell his story, Miguel knew that the most important part of his journey wasn't the scholarships or the internship or even the recognition. It was the knowledge that a single act of kindness could ripple outward, changing not just one life but many, including his own.